adjustments to the agenda?
No, just a few FYI things over under the town
Okay.
manager's
Number 3, review and approve meeting minutes for the May 21st, 2018 regular minutes.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion we approve the meeting minutes for May 21st, 2018, regular meeting with any corrections or additions.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? And, public to speak on a non-agenda item. None? Okay. Any boards or committees here to speak in regarding their boards or committees?
Ordinance Committee meets first and third Wednesday of every month at 6 here. And we're meeting on Wednesday of this week.
Then consent items, special amusement permits. And it looks like we have a proposed ordinance.
It's just a draft.
It's just a draft.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you need a motion to send to the ordinance committee to review and adopt an ordinance to fit Rangeley's needs, because the state law changed
Yes.
from what we had practiced previously. Okay.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion we send this on to the Ordinance Committee for special amusement permits and to have them rewrite the ordinance and take into consideration all the changes that have been made through the state.
Second.
Any discussion
May I ask a question in that?
about the ordinance committee?
About sending it to the ordinance committee, does it then, if it gets approved from you, it goes to the town meeting, correct?
When we rewrite or whatever we need to do to fix this, we send it back to the selectmen, they look at it, and then it goes to a vote, town meeting vote.
A town meeting vote?
Yes.
Correct. Thank you.
And there'll be public hearings along the way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? And we have correspondence. We have a thank you from the American Legion for the Memorial Day ceremony that happened on Memorial Day. And there was just one thing missing, is the wreath holder. Is that something that we supply to them?
It was put behind the monument after the last ceremony down there, and the American Legion didn't know it was there, and then it got brought up here to the back hallway and disappeared in a 2-day period at some point that week. So we're on the hunt for it.
Okay. Looking for a wreath holder. And then we received letters of support from the FAA in support for submitting the application submitted by the town of Rangeley, Maine to the FAA Airport Improvement Program. And that is signed by Susan Collins, Angus King, Bruce Baldwin. And then also a letter to the program director for Northern Border Regional Commission, also a letter of support by the same Congress members. Then the grant manager also received a letter in support for Northern Border Regional Commission. And that's what we have for correspondence. And do we have any new business? Old business, sorry. Old business. Old business is downtown revitalization plan update. And I think we had our last meeting where we had our discussion, and I don't think that there's anything else other than that committee meeting that we had, or the public meeting that we had at this time. I'm not sure if there are surveys that are out that can be filled out, so if you want to fill one of those out for your image of what your downtown should be, I encourage you to do so. And the next item is the park update and Lake Street. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've gone down there several times. It's really come along quite nicely. The bathhouse is in, the roof's on. We did review the construction, and I met with the contractor and had him do a couple of changes, a few things I didn't like. And then, I told him I used to be a framer, so why did you do that? But, I mean, to me it was minor, but it made me feel a lot better that he corrected a few things that I didn't like. And so Tom and I were down there, and that's all done Friday, so I'm happy with it. Something that Keith and I have been looking at is coming up with some information for you to complete the whole rest of Lake Street. I think the timing is probably good to do that right now. I mean, it's gonna end right down there by the, that last house. It only goes to that driveway, but the rest of the street needs some work, and the sidewalk needs some serious work. So we're looking to try to get some estimates on what it would cost to curb it, to, grind the road, repave it, to try to tie it in with the rest of the work. So then, that whole side is gonna look like Park Street. That's a beautiful, I mean, when you go down Park Street, it's beautiful all the way down. It's a real, like, welcome to Rangeley, it's beautiful. So I think some things that, a lot of roads I built around northern Maine is we put the base pavement down over the first winter, and then if anything is wrong, you're gonna know it by spring, and if it's not, then we put the finish coat on the next season. So if we look this fall and winter on what we need to do on the rest of the street, and we were able to just, on the new part that's being done now, just put the base pavement for the winter, and then try to tie it all in next year, I think that would probably be good timing. We probably have to go through the contract and see what we have to do for that, but that's kind of what we're looking at this point. And with the library there, and you've got a church there, and you could actually widen that road. And apparently there used to be a grass strip between the pavement and the sidewalk, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal to put the pavement right up to the curving on the sidewalk, and you'd end up with a better parking situation on at least one side of that road. So that's what we're looking at right now. I think it would be wise to tie all that in together.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, well, as soon as we get the information, we'll present it to you and see where we go from there.
Any new, go ahead, Mark.
I'd just like to mention that I support the town manager's recommendation on the paving of these roads after they've been reconstructed, that if you put the base coat down and let them go through the winter, you have a lot less problems, because often you have a spot that didn't quite get compacted enough, or you get a rock that was mixed, and that'll show up by the following spring, and rather start cutting out and patching the top coat there, which is gonna be visible till it gets done again, you go through the winter with the binder coat and then put the finish on it. I think the town will be a lot happier in the long run if they kind of use that as a policy for paving their roads after reconstruction.
Thank you. Any new business? Larry?
One quick question. New business, old business, I'm not sure it is. Can someone tell me what the requirement is for an occupancy permit or a liquor license or a whatever in this town? Because what my brother and I went through this past week, looking at if there is a criteria, I think we need to look at what that criteria is and not just turn a blind eye to some issues. I don't know what the policy is for instance, a liquor license, but anybody that is in compliance would not have a problem with the fireman, chief, and the code enforcement officer is having a tour of the facility to make sure that we don't have another dangerous situation like what we had in Aquasic, and we were all turned a blind eye to it. It could have been a serious both health issue and hazard. We had people living upstairs with no egress, we had total filth beyond what you could even possibly live in. Somehow this town allowed it. We gotta figure out a way not to let that happen ever again. Not to mention any names, but the policy for like a liquor license, I can't imagine that Steve or Kenny would be offended if both the fire chief and the code enforcement officer visited their application annually. They have nothing to hide, they have nothing to hide.
Can I address that? Do you mind? I'm sorry.
No, yeah, go
May I
ahead.
address that? If you're going to get a liquor license in this day and age today, and this has been on since at least 5 years, Larry, you have to have a sign off by the police chief, you have to have a sign off by the fire.
If that has happened.
It is happening.
Then we are negligent.
Well, wait a minute, let me finish. Anything that was in existence prior to, I think it's 5 years, it might be 7 years ago, what they then had to do was to go in and look to make sure stairways were cleared, and then give them notice that they had to have egress, fire safety hazards. Whether or not they did them, I can't address that. But
God, I would just hate to see that we would allow such a thing to ever happen again and have one of our people, residents, be hurt over it.
But there are steps in place now, plus the state mandates, and you can probably address this better than me, but the state mandates a criterion that the fire chief has to follow.
So when you apply for a liquor license today, for your renewal, the town has a checklist.
They do.
I'd like to see the one for the establishment that we just purchased, see who signed this off. I just hate to see somebody get hurt. We were setting up for a problem. Because I know like in Rumford, they shut down Tommy Guns for a similar reason. Well, they didn't renew the license, I'm sorry, they didn't shut it down, they didn't renew the license, correct?
Yeah, but you know,
It was a nice place to stop, do the last waterfall up the hill, and you guys killed it.
10 to 12 years ago, the selectmen refused to renew his license, and they had their town attorney in there and basically told him, you gotta have some pretty good reason to deny him the license, because it's a license given by the state.
Yeah,
You
if it
can't
doesn't
just,
meet-
you can't just, because you don't like somebody, or you
I
don't like
didn't
what
say
he's
about
doing,
like, I
I
said
mean, you know, you
health
have to
issues.
have a record of police calls and, you know, trouble on the sidewalk late at night, all kinds
Yeah,
of
but you
things.
issued the permit, the town issues the permit.
The town signs off on a liquor license, but it's the state that actually issues you the license.
Well,
They want the selectmen to hold it.
okay, I just want to go on record that I think we should have a policy in place. I don't think it would offend anyone that is doing it properly, to do it properly.
I haven't looked at application in a while, but it's quite a bit of an application.
Town of
No, it's, again, what Larry's saying has nothing to do with the liquor license itself. What Larry's talking about is what this town should be required for egress. Our fire chief should be stepping in and saying, this building doesn't meet life safety code.
Okay.
So we
That's
would
a
issue-
difference.
But is it the
than
fire
liquor
chief that
license.
does that, or is it actually the fire marshal's office?
It's fire chief.
Fire chief.
The fire chief would set the stage.
Because the
for
fire
problem.
marshal, I know, went into
Fire
a commercial building and said there wasn't enough sprinklers and all
That's
that
a
other
new
stuff. There's
construction
something
zone.
totally.
So wouldn't the fire
No,
chief?
this was an already established one,
Yeah, but wouldn't the fire chief pull the trigger on a concern?
probably.
Would-
And a lot of times the fire chief will call in the state fire marshal to do those kind
Right.
of things.
I just would hate to see,
When
Tricia.
I get the liquor license application, the police chief, the fire chief, and the code enforcement officer all need to sign off on it.
but if
And
they
then it goes to the
they
board
have
of
to sign
selectmen.
up, they need to visit the premises.
They're signing off on whatever the criteria is on that page.
They visit
They don't
me.
visit the-
They visit me.
Wow. I think I have a light set of standards.
And that we've had some that weren't signed, and then they said they had to go see it, and we've tabled those before.
I just hate to
Yeah.
see somebody ever go through what we saw down there, that's just, we all are guilty of turning a blind eye to it, but
Right, but that could have been from the last time it was looked at compared to, when your permit runs out.
I
Yeah,
don't think
just,
what you're talking about is the condition of the building, you're not talking about anything else here.
Oh, no, they have employees living upstairs with a 3-foot staircase,
I know.
2-foot staircase.
Yeah.
No fire escape,
Yeah,
no form of,
no,
all health issues thrown out to the wind. Grease in the front lid this thick. A fan hood that thick.
I don't understand how that would pass
I
muster.
don't either. And that's why I don't understand. I mean, just so that it can't happen again, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, no.
Ken,
The most stringent inspection is done by the insurance companies and the public. The public, and that's what have business, eventually the public says, hey, we're not gonna come here and support you, but the insurance company is pretty strict on that stuff. I don't know how they got by, or whoever they got by, but they're the biggest ones that check. They sometimes have some things that sound pretty trivial sometimes if they think that you gotta.
2 inspections a year from the insurance.
Well, I can imagine we do insurance inspections for this stupid.
Insurance inspections from the public health department annually.
right,
I mean, there's a lot of issues you're talking about that don't reside just in Rangeley. They reside at the state.
right.
Because the public health inspection is from the state.
Okay, but if it started as simple as a renewal, it could possibly, if you looked at what the renewal application was, maybe we could combat some of these future issues. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. All right, so town manager report updates.
The last meeting, it came up, the state's planning on overlaying Loon Lake Road, and we talked about, maybe putting that off and maybe being able to use that toward the project if we end up getting that Northern Border grant to rebuild the whole road. But Mark Hume told Keith, use it or lose it, basically. And he also said that it could be, the Northern Border grant, if it were awarded, would have to be completed by 2021, and it would probably be at the minimum 2020 before the state had enough money for its share. So it could be 2 or 3 years. And Mark said that overlay is designed to keep what you have in place so you don't lose the whole road. So my advice is, if they're gonna
Skim
pave
it.
it, let them pave it, and at least you'll have a smooth road for a year or so, couple of years, and then if we get the grant, then so be it. You'll end up, if you grind it, you'll have more reclaimed and add to the base, it'll be a better road. So,
Can you do something about that,
The Henderson bump?
the Henderson bump?
The Henderson Hump,
I'm sure they will when they rebuild it. I don't know, I drove out there today to relook at it, but I'm not sure what you mean by the
It's not
Henderson
bad
bump.
right now.
no, it's flat right now.
Yeah.
See where it's all cracked and
They'll
road
launch
depths
it
like
at the
that?
right time of year.
It's a huge spring there.
Well, that
Big
thing,
water bubbles out of the road.
I wonder, there's a couple of spots that looks like they're gonna need to shim it before they overlay it even, but I don't know if they'll even do that. So,
They should.
that's that's what we found out, and that makes sense, you better let
Right.
them do it, and then at least you could have.
So
Larry?
can't you limit the contractor to try not to stave that road up, the airport contractor? I mean, other than legal or limits up that road, you can limit it to that.
In the springtime, the selectmen can, through the road commissioner, post those roads for weight, but usually it's only in the springtime.
No,
The
you don't
only-
have to let it
State
run over 80,000 pounds.
It's state
You're right, that's a state road, state
State
road,
road,
so
Right.
the state has
State.
complete control of that.
So,
Yeah, you're right, I forgot about that part.
We just plow it. Okay, any other update?
Yeah, just a few things I just passed out to you. Mark, you had a complaint you wrote last March. I told you I'd look into it. I did send a letter off to you today about that.
Thank you.
Gave the selectmen a copy of it today. I just did that today. And I also, due to the 2 gentlemen here who have freedom of access requests in, I did get a letter today from the attorney, and we will forward you some information on that, so.
Did you figure out how to pay that overage on the
That will have to, selectmen will have to discuss, oh no, the overage, no, not yet, but, one thing I noticed at your budget public hearing the other day on one of the articles basically says at the end of the year, all accounts get, transferred to the undesignated fund balance. So to me, that means anything with a negative balance and anything with a positive balance, they wind up there, get adjusted, and then you close your books.
I don't think it was assumed negative.
But it doesn't say that. It's pretty clear to me. It says all accounts, period. So I take that both ways. So anything that's overdrafted like that would be.
But there's another article in there that says you have to have permission to take out of undesignated.
But what it is, we don't do a line item budget, which is what people have been talking about doing. So if we overrun one line, but don't overrun another line, they can offset each
Not
other.
off department. Within the same department.
Usually within the department, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't off department, so
And the only thing technically you're allowed to overdraw would be general assistance and road maintenance because of winters in Maine, we can't predict them, so.
right.
Those are legal.
And emergency funds, which we have an article for that.
You have an emergency fund, and that's something the selectmen can authorize you from. Yeah, so that, I mean, it seems to be ways to deal with that. And I did talk to the attorney, but he's not gonna charge us for separating out that March bill. So I specifically asked him that.
Yeah.
Maybe we're gonna start to reinvoice you for uniform after you can understand.
Yeah, he will, and I haven't called him, I don't think anybody's called him unless, maybe the first week of May when I was here, but.
Certainly it was a call every day before you were here. It was a call every day before you were here.
Well, quite a few over the
Steve?
course of the year.
Fill in the blanks for me. If I understand what you all just said, if there is a deficit in a line, let's just talk legal. Where can you offset it other than satisfying the debt service through unfunded balance?
Only through the selectmen's account. You have to have a surplus in that account. The selectmen's account, because that's where the legal work.
If that's the case, then it's outside of well, it wouldn't be outside the department, but
Yeah, I
it's a
understand.
different line.
Can I go get my town meeting book?
Absolutely,
I
yeah.
wanna read that. I was comfortable reading that. If that gets voted, then that's the solution to the whole issue.
There used to be, and I don't know if it's gone now, well, yeah, it's gone, because we don't have public town meetings. But there was like one of the very first articles that said, selectmen had authority to use unfunded balance, et cetera, et cetera. There was verbiage in there that indicated, so my assumption is that's where it comes out of to satisfy that, correct?
I'm assuming, that's, usually it's the first thing we vote on, or used to vote on.
Isn't there another question on there?
I don't think any questions have been deleted from the.
I don't believe you
No,
can
it
take
hasn't.
article.
No, we keep the same
So,
format.
forward would still be there.
Yeah,
I would think you could take from.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we still vote on it, just not,
You can't take from undesignated without the vote of the selectmen or the community.
okay,
You can move within your department
right.
to pay a particular bill, right? You cannot take from undesignated. If you could, why even have a budget? I mean, you have $4 million in your undesignated account, why don't you guys just go crazy?
Because we wouldn't have $4 million in one budget.
That's why you can't.
That's what you can.
That's why you can't.
Article B5, to see if the voters of the town will vote to close all fiscal year 2017-18 overdrafts to fund balance.
Overdraft, meaning you have more money than you needed.
Overdrafts mean you spent more
You
money
spent-
than what we budgeted. That's
Took
pretty
more out of the
clear.
budget,
So,
yeah.
so what that says, if the town votes that, then any overdrafts from any line items would be
That's
cleared in the fund balance. So you
That's
call-
crazy, because what if it was $100 grand?
Then that would take $100 grand out of your fund balance. The way that's worded,
Okay.
pretty clear. But typically what towns do is, budgets are only estimates, okay? and you're preparing them like 18 months before your
Right.
fiscal year ends. So, an auditor actually told me once, if you weren't overdrawn on some line items and have money left on others, I'd be worried about you. Because you can't predict them unless you have a, a solid quote a year ahead of time. So typically, all accounts get balanced within like the town manager's account. Some lines are gonna be over, some of them. If some you know are over, and you wait until you're close to the end of the year, then you wanna probably, cut back on something that you could probably do without for a few months, to try to help
So that
offset
was the
that.
impression that it had to go by department.
It typically does, because when the town votes, like they vote public safety.
Right,
or they vote-
396,000 for public safety.
Yeah, or they
It's
vote
396,000.
general government, which includes all the departments. Then you have like one lump sum of public works, you got $1 million, but that includes winter roads, summer roads, whatever.
That's why you can be over on sand and under on salt,
So, yeah.
or vice versa.
Exactly, because you can't predict, that it goes from, mild to extra heavy.
Usually, we're not talking about a huge amount of money here. I mean, usually
Right,
they overrun
right.
a few $1,000s. We're not talking about
Doesn't go over the total,
$100,000.
doesn't go over the total budget.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
The whole budget is always usually money left over, and that's what they mean by
Because you're forecasting 18 months.
closing those overdrafts to the fund balance. So when, you got a hefty fund balance of over $1 million, and you
It
might
has to
have
be
to close one account because
It
you're
would have to be a
5,000
check and
over.
balance system by
Right.
the selectmen when that's
Larry,
happening.
Mark has a
And-
question.
Sorry.
Mark has.
I think the town budget ordinance, or one of their management ordinances, states that in any, you're not supposed to overspend any entire department, but if any line over expenditure, I think there's like a 10% of the total budget of that line that can be.
Not even a percentage, it's just.
But I think in the
within
Rangeley's one, I
departments,
remember reading it at one time, I don't know if it's changed since then or whatnot, and then it's the town managers and the Board of Selectmen's job to monitor these things, to make sure that they stay, at 10% or less, so that there are sufficient funds to balance it out at the end of the year with that item that you just read. And that's why it shouldn't ever be a large amount of money.
Right.
And,
what-
I may be off on a little bit of this, but that's kind of the gist of what I recall
On the
having
ordinance.
read and seen in place up, not in the last 2 or 3 years, but previous to that, it's been pretty tight on that stuff, and there wasn't a big issue with, balancing those accounts.
Larry?
So does the selectman typically, who authorizes Rebecca to take from undesignated?
I don't think it does. I think what it is if you have a round number, $5 million budget total,
Yeah.
you might only spend $480,000, right? So it gives you 20,000. If you have one line item that was over 10, it comes out of that, and you still put 10 in your undesignated fund at the end.
So I would think
So
that
you're never over your your
if that's
total
the case,
budget
then
number.
that article means within the year's budget, not out of undesignated. So if you, when all the dust settles, if you're at a $5 million budget, and the last day of the year, you're 20,000 short, but you're 30 over, only 10 would fall into undesignated.
Right. Right. It would, the
Basically.
pluses and minuses all equal out,
Correct.
it's usually not over what.
Because you don't pull, I don't believe you pull from undesignated through the year, do you?
No.
No,
Well, you could only in an emergency.
in emergency,
Or with a vote of the board.
yeah.
Right.
Vote of the board, an
Vote of the public.
emergency, a natural
We
disaster.
have an article,
that's-
there's an article for that.
Yeah. Okay, Mark has a
The
question?
important part is the whole total budget number isn't gone over.
Donnie, Mark.
Do you folks get a quarterly report
Yes.
from the treasurer on all your different
Yes.
accounts there to see where you
And the
stand?
budget committee gets one as
for
well.
expenditures and what's been budgeted, so
Supposed to.
if you get a quarterly report, it should be fairly easy to
Right,
see which direction you're headed in
Yep.
and to make adjustments, cut back if you're going too far one way or
It's seasonal
No,
too
wait a
sometimes.
minute, it can't be that easy, because Larry brought up at the last meeting a year-long trend of legal fees being incurred and nobody caught it, so
It
it's not
just
quite
shows
that easy.
pluses and minuses, but.
Correct, there's
Go
pluses
Go
and
ahead,
minuses.
go ahead, Mark.
That doesn't mean it's not easy, it just means it wasn't being done.
Right.
Well, some of our expenditures are heavier in the early spring
Sure.
and not in the, the early spring.
Right.
So it's hard to predict where we're gonna end up because we gotta go all the way till the end of June.
And a lot of this stuff, especially the fuel and stuff for the winter, if you have a really cold
Green
winter
bottles.
and blah, blah, blah. Yeah,
It's
it's-
over. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, if you have money remaining in the accounts, is it still going at the end of our fiscal year? We're all done, the books are being cleaned up and so on, and the highway department has $80,000 left in their account. It used to be it goes into general fund, that's the case still?
All goes in fund balance,
Unless it's-
undesignated fund balance, which is
Unless it's
town
sorry.
surplus.
Unless it's a sign for a project.
And then the selectmen could carry it forward if it was, money set aside for a specific purpose that you weren't able to get to during the year, the selectmen could carry that forward.
You can keep it.
I thank you for talking about this, because this is something that, because we don't have town meeting anymore, people don't get to hear this anymore.
Yeah.
This conversation doesn't get to be had in a voting booth. Thank you.
Right.
Okay. All set for your updates?
Just one other thing, Anna Lee will be here, and I guess there'll be a special selectmen's meeting, 6 o'clock on Thursday this week, which is just an executive session for labor negotiations. Which, Tricia had already posted a meeting, but she also wanted to discuss the town, the town manager hiring for
Oh,
issues.
good.
So you'd have both of those items to discuss both in executive session, so
Thursday at 6.
that's Thursday at 6 for all, I guess it's important for all of you to be there,
Okay.
because we're getting close to the end of the year and the end of the union contract.
Will there be action taken after the meeting?
I don't know, it all depends on what's found,
Depends what she brings to us,
right?
as far as the labor stuff goes.
The CEO gave a summary of his report. He had 4 permits issued, and he's preparing to issue a written notice of violation to TLB Enterprises. He has worked on his 80K court rule test to get certification for that. He attended the MBOIA annual conference, and he is addressing land use violations that have been lingering. And the Public Works Director has reported the highway that Rangeley Avenue is pre-pavement construction, under pre-pavement construction. The wet and calcium roads in construction phase on Pleasant Street, Rangeley Ave, and Franklin Ave. The tennis wind screens have been installed. The goose deterrent string installed along the shoreline, the dock, the beach, and the swim area have all been prepped. For the solid waste, the spring cleanup continued. The summer hours are open. And for sewer, to start the summer spraying program, adjust manhole to grade on Lake Street for park project. And then on the director's office, the park project, the Bass House roof is framed. You said that's going to be, done. You've capped it over, it's been capped over, and you did an update on that bathhouse.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
roofs on, metal roofs on.
Okay.
At the time he wrote the report, I don't know if the cap is on it, that's just the cap over the top of where the peak is.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's not on, I didn't notice, but that's basically done, so.
And then it's hold a recovery scoping meeting with FEMA, and potential reimbursement for October 2017 storm.
Can I comment on that too?
Yeah, absolutely.
We met with the FEMA gentleman and the county emergency management person. And back after that October storm, there was some damage done for the fish screen on Rangeley Lake. And one of the things, they had estimated quite a bit of money because they thought they had to bring a crane in and, it's expensive. But the latest estimate, I guess Joe Roach might have got, was like $4,800. And the guy from FEMA said that we have to be able to prove ownership of it. And you may be more familiar than I am, but I read a few things that back in 1992, I believe, and in 2011, some work had been done, and nobody could determine who actually owned the thing. It looked like Rangeley stepped up in 2011 and come up with $10,000 to change those screens. And the, I don't know, power company, somebody came up with about $5,000 to provide labor, so it was like a joint effort. I saw a state law that was passed back in the 1960s or something. Didn't actually clarify who owns it, so I doubt we'd be able to get any FEMA money to repair that. The FEMA usually pays 75%. State would pay 15% of any damages, and town would be responsible for 10%, but all of the overtime for barricading and, all the tree limbs that fell down and all that. So we gave them all of the, all of the necessary documentation, so we will get, something back for those. I'm sure they'll approve all of that stuff. It's just, the only thing in question was that fish gate. So we'll have to see what happens with that.
Okay. Larry?
I don't think you ever owned it. I think Union Water Power owned it, was gonna remove it. The guys at Sportsman elected not to remove it. Came to the town in the 70s, and the town had an agreement to maintain it with
Not to
Union.
own it.
Not to own it.
Okay.
Union Water was then bought out by Brookfield. They don't want anything to do with it, but they still own it. You've agreed to maintain it or tear it down.
So Brookfield owns it?
So, only because Brookfield is the new union.
Okay.
I don't believe the town of Rangeley owns it, because I know I'm the butter to it, and I had to buy some stuff from Union to take possession when they were eliminating their liability all the way down the river. And the town of Rangeley signed on for that probably 30 years ago, and you could find it, I don't know, but I was here when there was an agreement between the guides and sportsmen, the town of Rangeley, and Union Water Power to maintain that fish right.
Well,
Does that sound
I know some
somewhat
of the
familiar?
folks at Brookfield, and they own a lot in Rumford, so maybe if they own it, maybe we can get them to fix it.
I don't think they wanna fix it, but I think they participate.
They don't want anything to do with
I don't think they want anything to do with it. I don't think they care if it's in there or not.
I wonder if they'd sign it over to the town.
So,
I wonder if they'd sign it over to the town, because then if we owned it, we'd have more.
If you own it, then FEMA would help replace it after it was damaged.
Brookfield doesn't like it because it changes their flow rates dramatically. They wanna pull 4,000 a minute, they can't because the screen won't let it. You follow me? Like this,
Yeah.
last fall when we had a flood, there was 2 feet of elevation difference between the river and the lake. They couldn't pull the lake fast enough because of the screen. But some of that's because of debris, because the town's not taking care of their responsibility. I'm sorry, the guys in sportsmen were the ones that are supposed to maintain it. As I remember 30-year ago discussion, you could try to find that on paper, but that's what I know about it.
So do we need a motion to have you?
I just have
look
a
into that?
question. Say we make a deal with them and they give us, or whatever they do. The fact that it's after the fact of the
That could be
flood,
an issue.
is that gonna be a problem?
That could be an issue.
But going forward.
Because we didn't own it when it happened.
I don't know if you want to assume the liability of it for $4,500.
You're absolutely right. I mean, now we're stuck with the thing, and we got an insurance company and the whole 9 yards.
Liability.
No.
It's Brookfield's. I don't know if you want to change that.
We got enough liability.
So is it a matter of looking up a contract or something that?
We looked through all the folders we could find on it, there's not a lot of
That's what I
information.
said, makes sense to use.
Very sketchy was what I read about who actually owns it.
Oh,
So the state has been involved, and like you say, the power company.
And the guys.
Inland Fish and Wildlife, they of course wanna keep it to
Right.
keep the fish stock in the lake.
Yeah.
So,
But I think it was supposed to be a partnership.
one of these days I'll come down, you can show it to me, cause I don't know what it looks like.
It's supposed to, I think, when I was a kid, it was supposed to be a partnership.
I'd
So
like
it's
to
cheaper
see
to
it.
spend the $4,800 to repair it and just
Way
leave it as
cheaper.
it is.
Way cheaper, and leave the liability in their court.
Right.
did you have a question, Steve?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, I thought you raised your hand.
Thank
Just
you.
play with his hair.
Nick.
Dreaming about what I used to have.
Nick Weaver might have some documentation if you can't find it, he doesn't. Peter Poor might have some information or some knowledge of that, he worked for Union before Nick.
He's in Andover.
Sorry,
He lives in Andover.
right? His dad's gone, but Peter was responsible for that and took care of that for many years as we were children. Peter's our age, so
Okay.
he might have more information, I have his number at the office.
As the director's office also mentioned, coordinate cemetery water line repair, that was completed by Burgess Construction, and research service line replacement, Ted Berry Company and ETTI. And that's the update from the Public Works Director. Also for the Rangeley PD, they had 211 calls with the top three being building checks, community policing, directed patrol, and police information. And then you gave us that information on that.
Question?
Yeah.
What time period were those 203
Oh,
calls?
sorry.
Since the last meeting or for the month of May?
They were from May 17th to June 1st.
Oh, yeah, couple weeks, yeah.
300 of it?
Memorial Weekend.
211.
300 calls to service.
211.
211.
Still,
Oh, it was Memorial Weekend fixed in there too. So.
Well, they do their regular building checks.
oh, that's part of it.
That's
Yeah,
part of
yeah,
it. That
right.
was the number one. There's 79 building checks, and then the community policing, and that is 59. And
31
then,
parking dogs and whatever else happened to happen.
right, I mean, there's trespass, that was one, and then the other ones are smaller. I just usually
No
do the
barking
top
dog.
4.
No parking dogs.
Barking dog.
No barking dogs?
Nope.
Only 2 911 hang-ups.
See one. Anyway.
All right, so calendar. We've got June 5th with the school budget hearing. We've got June 7th at 6 p.m. the executive session for labor negotiations, which John has already mentioned. And June 12th is election day. And we've already discussed other business.
One thing, do we know, are we within the levy limit for the forecasted budget?
I don't know.
Don't know.
The last update I saw was through April. So I don't have anything for May yet.
No, for the future budget of 18, 19,
Yeah,
are we close?
close to what?
Are we gonna exceed the levy limit?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know why you have this issue every year myself.
Why do I have it, or why does the town have it?
No, why not you. but
Only
Not
because,
why the town has to deal with
Well, it's
this every year,
simple.
because you have, the only thing I can think of is you have such a large state value.
yeah, and so little subsidies. So the state only allows 2.3% a year and
Well-
actual growth. Anytime you exceed 2.3%, you have to go figure out how not to do it. Because the state of Maine is not gonna allow you to price an elderly lady out of here without planning a year out.
But it leaves the option to increase the limit or to exceed the limit. So in your case, you exceeded it, which is a 1-year deal.
Then you gotta go
But
back to
you've been
a year.
doing it 1 year every year for I don't know how many years, so. One of the issues that probably drives it is you just incurred this debt, $2 million, and you're gonna be making the payments. That certainly would increase your town's share of the budget enough so that that in itself might be the reason you're overriding.
Maybe.
That could be the main reason, and I haven't had a chance to really dig into the last several years to see why it is every year you have to exceed it, because even towns like Mexico, the first year of that, I'm looking at like a $30,000 increase in health insurance, and the limit only allowed us to increase $5,000. And it's like, what do you do? So the first 3 out of 4 years, we had to vote to increase the limit, and then the next year we didn't, and then the next year we did again.
The problem though is, John, you're trying to maintain a structured, financial, stable community for people to own, work here.
But you know what's even the problem that the town management has to consider is it's our job to maintain the roads, it's our job to provide the police. And all these things cost, and that was an arbitrary limit that was a solution of the Pileski campaign, who if that ever passed, fortunately the state was smart enough to vote that down.
I didn't write the rules, we have the rules in front of us.
That was, believe me, I have argued this in Augusta myself, it's a
I'm
terrible
only
law.
discussing the rules we have in front of us.
The cost of oil and health insurance has nothing to do with the average, 10-year average income of the citizens.
You know, but if you took the average guy that has a house, it costs him
I understand that.
$100,000.
I understand
And the
that
taxes are
completely.
$1,000. And you make them $1,300, maybe they can't live here anymore.
I understand that completely.
That's all it would, why we
But
have
they-
a right
but you have, but people that do that simply to save taxes aren't looking at the reality of what it costs to operate a municipality. And the reality is, you go to the citizens every year with a budget, and when the citizens vote that budget, especially in your case, because you're a town meeting, it's the citizens that are speaking. The reason this law started in the first place is they were concerned with city councils in Lewiston, and, they had complete authority. People didn't vote that, so that's what they were arguing
Again,
against,
but with the rules we have in front of us, we cannot exceed the budget more than 2.3%.
unless the people vote to. And that's why that's
Unless they do,
before you.
last year they elected not to.
My point is, if you voted to increase it rather than exceed it, once you get there, you may not have to do that every year. See what I mean? But I can't give you the
I
information as
understand that, I'm just saying we voted to
exceed.
exceed, not increase.
Right.
It means that people are asked to hold a steady line. That's what they,
So, let me give you this example that I did happen to catch. Last year, they asked to increase 218,000. They voted it down, you went to a second town meeting, and they lowered that to like 190 maybe, or 70, whatever. This year, you're voting to exceed 154. Now think about that. Had you voted last year to increase it, you'd be under the limit this year.
Okay.
Because they exceeded 100, whatever.
Hence my concern. Wasn't the one that, was the majority that voted that way. But the concern is the numbers don't work.
The law doesn't work.
Okay.
And here's the real, what the bigger problem is? You can't convince the legislature because they get an annual report, and it's the gross report. So, all the municipalities in the state, they're underneath the limit by, 2%.
But
But that's not the case for little rural towns.
we only have the rules that are in front of us.
Bottom line, it costs what it costs.
It costs what it costs, and most people who vote in town meetings support the services the towns are trying to provide.
But the ordinance says you can only
I mean,
run so much.
Whose road do you not want to plow?
Exactly.
We're gonna start having classes. I think we should have started classes. John can be our teacher.
I fought a lot of these issues.
This whole thing's been a sticky wicket since they put it out there.
That and revenue sharing, and, I was just looking at some of your, you've lost half your revenue sharing,
Right.
in the last 8 years.
Because of our evaluation.
No,
No.
because the state went from 5% to 2%.
Right, legislative acts.
Yeah, and, you know, there's no justification for the state not giving that back to the towns now, because the economy has fully recovered in Maine. And that's what I've been pushing all last year, is to increase that back to the 5%. So hopefully that'll be this upcoming session, that we'll get that money back.
Good luck.
Because that the state revenue's growing by in excess of $100 million every year for the last 2 years and the next at least 2 or 3 years estimated. Every year an additional $100 million into the state coffers. And that, you know, they borrow from the towns, basically.
Yep.
$670 million over the last 10 years came from the revenue share, and it's called a municipal fund, and the state took it to balance their own books. That's a lot of money.
Mhm.
So hopefully we'll get that back in a year or two.
Okay, so, select board communication.
I have something. After the last public hearing we had last week about the rat ban, that public hearing wasn't about the rat ban, but they brought it up. I kind of poked around. Nobody can find the rules, nobody can find who's in charge. We were in charge for the first couple of years because we took the money from the grant. But then it went away. And now nobody's quite sure who's supposed to be in charge or any of that. We haven't seen their budget, which we should, because we give them the $5,000. So I think we need to kind of poke around more and try to figure out what the heck's going on with this thing, because there's a lot of unhappy people out there. And she's not the only one. And anyway, that's pretty much what I found, so I
Why
think.
don't you just ask the director of the RAF ad for an accounting last year?
What's that?
Why don't you, since you're a huge contributor, why don't you ask the director for an accounting of the last year, fiscal year, so you can figure it out?
Yeah. I mean, what I did find out is the selectmen don't really have any power over this thing anymore. We just, it's like everything else, we give them the money, like the health center and stuff, and they do what they do.
Who owns
Yeah,
it or runs
Mark
it?
had a question, sorry,
Yeah.
Mark's been
We
waiting.
own the van.
Mark's been waiting, sorry, Mark's been waiting, go ahead, Mark.
Actually, the van was donated, as I remember.
In
Go
the
ahead.
request for donations, isn't part of the process a copy of the budget?
It should be,
Well, I think it is.
and I don't remember seeing one.
Any nonprofit that submits,
They don't request a donation, they're part of the culture, so we don't see anything. We're just-
Okay.
oh, okay.
Procedurally,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what's
Right,
going on.
no, that's important, that's an
Yeah.
important point, yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know about the last van, though the first van was bought by the town of Rangeley.
exactly,
The grant was overseen by the town.
yeah.
They brought the proposal to the Board of Selectmen, I know you were on it, and I believe you were on it then, Mark. And they came to us and, you know, obviously we did it, the
Mhm.
town did it.
Right,
So I don't know where it got lost,
I
but
don't either, but we need to find it.
I can't imagine that there's an organization being run by volunteers who's taken the liability for this rat ban. I believe it's still in the stocks of you folks.
Yeah,
I thought it was, all the liability was in the health center, no?
No, Health Center wasn't involved.
no. And apparently we're not involved, we just give them $5,000 and let it, they get the rest of it from wherever they get it, and, nobody seems to be in charge.
We did get a request for them to buy a new
Did
vehicle,
Joanne Chapman
and
say
now
that?
they're down to one vehicle again.
Yeah, they are.
That was, how many years ago was that? Was it 2 years ago?
Maybe,
We helped fund it.
I think we are involved. Don't they park it down at the town garage?
yes.
Yeah.
You know, so if they store it on town property, you know.
Yeah, but I'm talking
some
about
type
actually
of
having any
relationship
control
between
over
the
it.
town and them, in addition to the money being there, so, you know, it would be, at that meeting, you know, the former town clerk, Edna Thompson, said that there was a folder up here that
There
has
is.
everything in it
There's
since
nothing
its
in it.
inception. Now, we had.
There is, but there isn't, there's no
Well,
guidelines.
I guess, you
Yeah.
know, from what I'm reading, from what you said, you know, someone's looked for it and hasn't found it.
Well, we found the folder, and there's a couple things in there, but it doesn't tell us how this is supposed to all shake out, and
Register insurance.
who's in charge, and who decides who goes and who doesn't go.
Yeah. Steve?
I would recommend that you speak with Joanne Chapman.
That's my next, yeah.
All right, she's gonna be the one who's gonna give you the most recent history,
Yep,
probably the clearest understanding of how this is operating.
exactly. I just bring it to everybody's attention that we need to at least find out who has the say in what happens here with this
Larry?
thing.
Do we register and insure it?
I'm not sure.
No.
I don't think so.
Have a municipal
Just
plate.
saying no.
I don't believe we insure it.
No, I
that's
think
one
they had to
thing
show
did.
an insurance binder. I'm trying to think for that
Yeah,
estimate
that's
that they
one
did.
thing that they
And
did.
all we did was move money for them out of their own reserve that they had put in there.
The town
We
had to
accept,
be the-
we accept payments for when people donate for rides, and we put that into an account just for them. But they don't have their own TIN number. It's kind of like one of those deals where you get a grant for the town, and they don't, the organization doesn't have their own tax ID number or anything like that, so it's one of those things that happened years ago, I think, that just fell underneath the town tax ID number.
We need to find out who's in charge.
I found two files that had rap in written on it. One had 2 complaints in it, and the other one had a request to the Department of Motor Vehicles in 2006 to update the handicap decal that they used to hang on the windshield. That was it, nothing else.
So would it be reasonable for you to make a motion to have Donnie pursue the
Oh, no.
direction of the rat there? Come back to you and report finding.
Well, I think that, that John would be able to find that information out. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think we need a motion for that, do you?
I'll keep looking, I mean.
We can just keep poking around, I mean.
There- like I said,
talked to
there was
Joanne,
one
that's the
where we-
biggest thing.
I think it was like 2 years ago where we moved money where they bought the new vehicle. I don't know if the registration is here, so you can see what year it was, to see what that budget was. It was a
Well, we-
brand new Subaru. They traded in,
We give plates here, right? Do they have a municipal plate?
And I do remember somebody paid for most of one of them, I believe, or
The,
something
the,
like
the Subaru, excuse me,
yeah, go
the
ahead.
Subaru was a donation from an individual. The handicap van was purchased by the
that.
state.
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
It was an elderly couple that gave it to the town. We accepted the gift of that.
okay.
So, anyway. Well, maybe I'll call Joanne and see if she can,
Trade.
There was a
Like some-
trade-in. There was a trade-in for the
Light on
two
this
together.
They didn't like the van.
They didn't take, oh,
They had a hard time handling it,
okay.
So
Yes, they wouldn't drive it in the winter because it was too,
so they traded in for what they have now.
right. Okay.
That was since I've been here.
Yes, I know, I was like thinking, yeah.
Mhm.
And I believe the contact people were on that, because they came in presented, I believe, for that.
It was the Richie Compass guy and Joanne Chapman. I can never remember his name, he used to work for
Wayne
Richie
Peacock.
Compass. Wayne Peacock and Joanne Chapman were the two that made the presentation 2 years ago for the contribution. Right.
Used to be a presentation at every town meeting. Stand up and talk about it. God, I miss those days.
We know.
well, I don't know. We'll see if we can get to the bottom of this, 'cause we need, the first thing is we find out who's actually in charge of the thing. Anyway,
Okay, so, any other select board communication? All right, we're not having the executive session, so I need a motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn?
All those in favor?
Thank you
Do
guys.
you wanna discuss it?
I know.